Welcome to the ThinkSpace podcast with myself, John Staskowski, and Danny Massaro. Our goal with this podcast is a simple one. We discuss and dissect a prescient topic, issue, or theme that we think is interesting and might help us humans better understand why we think, feel, and do what we do. If you'd like to engage in these types of conversations too, you can check out thinkspace.academy for a unique cohort-based course that will help you think critically and live authentically. Hope you enjoy the episode. Right, Danny, well-being or being well? I'll let you introduce a little bit more of where the origins of this come from, but I think the trigger for it in one way was I commented to you a while ago how well-being was the new corporate buzzword, as it were, and everyone seems to be into well-being, whether it's sport, education, business, all these different fields. There seems to be loads of well-being experts popping up, people in roles that has well-being something or other in their job title, well-being practitioners, well-being services, well-being programs. It just seems to be everywhere. And I looked at it, I thought, what's going on here with this? I did you can do like the Google Trends search where it'll show you like how common particular words are in literature and then just how common they are as search terms. And well-being is basically like flatline for years and years and years and years, going right back to like the 1800s. And then in roughly around 2000, from that point onwards, it just suddenly like ramps right up, and well-being is just like everywhere, it seems, in literature, and people are wanting to know about well-being. So that just led us into what you started looking at on your PhD, which I'll let you talk about, but it gets into it. And you very much made that distinction between there's well-being, but that isn't being well. And that's an area of interest for us. And I'm sure lots of the stuff we're going to talk about today, I think we'll end up dipping into little things we've covered on previous episodes, because it all kind of comes into the mix around this thing of what is well-being. How does that differ from being well? So just a little definition that I got in terms of like your classic Wikipedia dictionary definition. Well-being refers to what is intrinsically valuable relative to someone. So really it means what is good for the person, or ultimately what is good for this person. So it's very much about the self-interest of the individual person and what is best for them.
I think our job and what we've been trying to do lately is get people thinking around topics such as authenticity or what's a good life, what's a meaningful life, and so on. So this one is obviously pertinent because it's well-being. It's, with the Heidegger stuff we've covered and the philosophy is all generally about we are human beings and what is it to be. The original Greeks perhaps was what was a good life. What we're doing here and how are we supposed to experience this thrownness? We've been thrown into the world. How are we supposed to we live, we're born, we die? How are we supposed to, from the start to the end, generally get through it well? We don't obviously want to be suffering. That's, the thing about eternally you'd go to heaven and you don't, and that's all great and well, and you don't want to go to hell because that's, doom and gloom and misery and pain. So obviously humans have an inherent interest in living a good life, living a well life. The recent terminology seems to be this concept of well-being. So where people are struggling or not doing so well, and I noticed this in sport, when I started my study and just before it, every day I went on the BBC News website for sport, or maybe picked a newspaper up or something. There was an athlete coming out saying, yeah, I won the gold medal, but I'm depressed. Or, I've got gambling issues and my life's hell and it's all right having money, but this and that. And then it was like, I've got imposter syndrome. Or, yeah, I'm struggling, and it seemed to be a lot of famous people that had done well coming out and actually saying how many problems they'd had. Victoria Pendleton, the cyclist, I've won gold, but my dad doesn't love me type thing. And I've never got over it. And you don't be me. My life's miserable. And the next thing, she's doing a TV show, trying to cheer up. And then the next thing you hear is that, she's not so well again. And then I think after that, so all these stories were coming out. Agassi was another one, Andre Agassi's book, Open. There was lots of books, Ronnie O'Sullivan in snooker. All sports had these, they got a bit like trendy to reveal your vulnerabilities and say, you might think my life's great, but. And then, we started to see, obviously, therapy and opportunities, that old saying where there's tragedy, there's trade, so it would come into the language more, and then people would like, it's good to talk, and it always has been good to talk. I mean, that goes without saying. Talk to your friends, talk, get things off your chest, sort of thing. Talk, but it just suddenly became this. It sort of became a bit more medical. It was like there was a word depression, which is, you were depressed and clinically depressed, and then in a sort of the middle there, then well-being came on as a bit of a lower level, that I'm not feeling very well, or, and all of a sudden I think in companies, because of litigation, and I think perhaps responsibility, and you have to make sure that you're looking after people nowadays in your health and safety or whatever. I think companies then started to think, we're going to have a well-being department because people are they're telling us they're not feeling well. We need to kind of like make sure we are helping them, or at least look like we're helping them, and cover our backs.
I wonder if there's an even more kind of like, I don't know if sinister is the right word, and he's the cynic in me. I'm to try and play devil's advocate with some of this stuff. I did see something about the number of work days that were being lost in your classic companies, schools, universities, wherever there's employees, basically.
Right.
Like you're talking millions and millions of work days being lost because people were going off with stress, depression,
right,
anxiety, and this coincides with that rise in the well-being terminology, more like the internet era, the digital age, and all that stuff coming in.
Yes.
So the cynic in me kind of says, well, is this not just a little bit of another profit-driven motive where the company goes, hang on, we've got all these people going off here with stuff we could do with this stopping because it's hitting us on the bottom line, and then that's maybe where a lot of this started coming in.
Well, I think things emerge for many reasons, don't they? And obviously that's probably one of them as well. If you're a business person and you don't want your staff off and you can stop them being ill, I suppose that comes across as a genuine altruistic win-win. We don't want you to get ill because we love you, and it helps us because you're not off. And that helps you because it'll give you more meaning and you'll feel like you're a proper worker, and who wants to be off with stress? So it's, yeah. And I think this is it. So I think society and culturally things do sort of grow like fashion, because, fashions do, and so on, and things spread as well, that if you hear your friends have got a well-being problem, then maybe you have as well, because you're a bit up and down. So you can only use the language that you have at your disposal. And perhaps when this word, people weren't clinically depressed, but they were feeling what the existentialists might have said, is and Heidegger, that the everydayness, the dullness sometimes of the everyday, and the pressure of the everyday. And de Beauvoir saying that, maybe the ambiguity of life, it's not the dream life after you've been a child that you might imagine. You long to go back to being a child so you can just have the innocence of that. But as you get older, particularly late teens and into your 20s, 30s, life gets on top. Maybe life's running out. It hits you with all these things. Maybe if we were sold slightly too much that life is meant to be like a straight happy line, maybe then we've just become a little bit more generationally. We've been sold on the idea of perhaps being constantly sort of happy and getting attention and switched on, and you should be life should be good, it should always be pretty good, not necessarily happy, but meaningful, good. And all those times you're stressed and things hit you and you're ill and all that, maybe that's like, I need a word for that. We need a word for it. We can't study existentialism and go, oh, that's what it is. So maybe that well-being and I've got a well-being problem, or that word's come into the language because it just is the best word we've got to explain that existential everydayness, worrying, happy 1 minute, that ambiguity of, I love my job, I hate my job, I'm proud of myself, I'm not proud of myself, I'm a slave to the company, but I'm a free person. I'm moving on in life, but in some ways I'm stuck. I'm rich, but I'm poor, in my emotions, or whatever. I don't know what it. So all these things have just gone so much that well-being perhaps is in a weird way a new word for the truth, in a way, of how life does evolve. But I think what's happened is what's happened in the last 3-4 years, because it's so prevalent, and like you say, it's become into the literature so much, and it's all around as just a word we all understand now. Of course, then well-being experts get on the rise, don't they?
Well, do we? Like you said, word we all understand, but do we? I definitely agree it's a word we all use.
Yeah.
But are we all understanding what we're saying when we're meaning it? Has it not just become one of those words that is so overused it just becomes meaningless? We all think we know what we're on about when we say, like well-being.
Yeah.
Because if we go back to that original definition I said at the start, what is good for the person? Well, every single person is entirely different. So their well-being is never going to be your well-being or my well-being. But we use it as if we can just, right, this is the well-being program for our company. This is kind of what we'll do. We've got these well-being services. And we all think we know what they are. But are they? It's just a word we seem to use, like productivity and like other buzzwords that you kind of like engagement, all these different words that we use that we think we know what they mean.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that the word is just a word to simplify, but it's such a complex problem, like to even define well-being. And when I was looking at it and thinking about this podcast, something came back to me about this book I'd read about wicked problems. That well-being, in a way, is a wicked problem. And there was a bit of research in 2016 by Bash et al., and they described it as a wicked problem. And wicked problems are seen as difficult to define and have no definitive or objective answers. It's even hard to actually say what it is. So when I went back to my other book, the book called Wicked and Wise by Watkins and Wilbur, they said at the beginning that a wicked problem is something where there is no definitive formulation of the original problem. Wicked problems have no endpoint where the problem is considered fixed. It's not possible to identify all the possible solutions to a wicked problem. So this, let's say the wicked problem here is well-being, the word. Wicked problems have no binary right or wrong solution, only better or worse. Every solution is a one-shot operation that is usually probably slightly right and mainly wrong. There is no absolute test to measure the success of the solution. Every wicked problem is essentially a unique one. Every wicked problem can be considered to be a symptom of another problem, and wicked problems can be explained in many ways, and due to the consequence of each attempted solution, social planners can't be wrong. So, so let's put that into reality. You've got a well-being problem, John. I'm a yoga teacher. Come to my yoga for 10 weeks. It'll fix everything. It's good for your blood flow. It's good for your mind. You meet people. It'll get you out of the house. Now, that could be great for you. You could come along and go, I found the solution temporarily at least. I could ring my mate and he just goes, it's just made everything worse. I feel like an absolute not myself. And, so is the yoga, is come to yoga every Thursday for well-being and coffee type morning thing? Is that useless? No. To some people it is, and to some people it isn't. And this was the crux of my PhD. My PhD was a rejection of this, how one should live well through a sporting life. When I'd read all about these athletes and I'd been living in the life and knew how turbulent and up and down and left and right and oscillating and blah, blah, usually influenced by winning and losing for me and my wife. But all sorts of other things can come in, injuries, blah, 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 and everyone has their own background. And what it led me to was how might one live well through a sporting life? And for that research tool, I used existential phenomenology, which was basically what is the experience of the individual, but the individual being an existential person, someone who lives through time, who knows they have a past and they know they have a future, and everything that they're doing in the present is re-editing that potential future and re-editing that past. So we live through time. So phenomenology then, existential phenomenology, which was the core of a lot of original, the psychological therapies of Carl Rogers and all these types of brilliant people. These people really did investigate all this stuff and they knew what they were on about. So they would do a lot of talk therapy, a lot of digging and a lot of getting down to give people their individual time. That's looking at the well-being as a very personal, what I feel, what I go through in my particular life. And let's go from there. Now, I suppose that's just one way. There's like society issues as well, and there's actual society facilities as well. We're all not going to feel well if we get our electric and power cut off, and gas. But essentially, those things are usually there in most of these places where people have well-being issues. So essentially it's an internal interpretation of one's experience that's always kind of going on. And I got to the point of like proposing at the end of my study that being well type thing is is always a constant question. It requires a constant taking part in one's everyday. You can be wiped out, like moods can overtake you, things can come in from left field, good days, bad days. But what you eventually start to do is get that little bit of self-reliance on what makes me tick, even to the point of, if you're not feeling well, just stay with it. If you're ill, just be ill. If you're having a bad few months, kind of stay in it a bit and don't try and fix it straight away. Now, the other person might try and fix it. So it's this real self-understanding and self-reliance. The times that you are feeling well, it's important to cash in. So on the days that you're like, wow, feeling good today, they are the days you can just have fun and do what you want. But also they're the days that you can bolster yourself for the rainy day that's on its way. And that was sort of Heidegger's anticipatory resoluteness. That was about, things are going to come your way. You're going to be down next week or in a month or at some point. You're going to get old. There's stuff coming. The flood's on its way. Build the ark. Now, when you're on your good days, it's much easier to kind of do that. And that would be like things like, investing in yourself, get your health sorted, get fit. What makes me tick? Read things, ring your friends, get your house cleaned up. Whatever it is that makes you feel, however silly it is or however minuscule it is in your world, do the garden and clean your car. On the good day, start a PhD, do some reading, make some music, listen to some music. All these little things that are there, what some of the philosophers call wonderment. Try and get that wonderment on the good days of, wow, what a world. Watch a game of sport and have that like, wow, that's great. Don't just be bored and look for the result. Listen to some music and really let it get into you. And don't just go, it's another music. Watch a film and let it inspire you. Go and have a good night out. Go and talk to a friend. Go and learn a new skill and like really get excited by it and like geekily get into it for a bit or something. Like look for that wonderment. So I think well-being, what I got was like, it is going to be up and down, but on the good days, you've got to cash in to help the obviously incoming floods of the bad times.
Bit like the Psychologically Rich Life episode we did, didn't we? Where it's like, yeah, get out of your comfort zone, like be curious, all that stuff. But does there not come a point, and this is where I think I'm thinking well-being is maybe an issue as the focus, where you can do loads of that stuff, but at the fundamental level, if your life's still a bit shit, and what I mean is, like, I'm thinking, because a lot of this is in like corporate lingo, isn't it? If you're doing a job, so I'm thinking of, I don't know if we mentioned it on here before, but a guy called David Graeber wrote a really good book called Bullshit Jobs. And that coincidentally aligns with when well-being became more of a popular word. The advent of the office job where you kind of sat 8-9 hours a day, you're not really doing anything that has any real point beyond the job. So you're just moving stuff around on a spreadsheet, pestering people with emails, meetings, constant meetings, all that stuff. But you kind of sense, or deep down that there's no real meaning to it. There's no real point to the job. It's just a kind of invention in the society we're in to keep people busy and kind of give you the illusion that you're doing something in a way. Now, if that's your core existence, if you're spending 40, 50 hours a week doing that, you can have all the wonderment and stuff you want around the edges. But fundamentally at your core, you're still sat there going, this is shit, I hate my job. I kind of got this deep nagging feeling that this is not what I should be doing. And that's where you're getting these well-being gurus swooping in to kind of tinker around the edges, where fundamentally you'd be better just getting rid of the job and doing something else, which is a much bigger existential shift, isn't it? Than I'm going to like get into the wonderment and I'm going to read this and I'm going to do that. Brilliant, do it. But fundamentally, at your core, are you being authentic, all that stuff? Does your life have meaning and all that stuff? That's largely going to come from what you're doing most of the time, which is most people's jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's first, you break that up into stages and levels in a way. Some people have enough self-awareness that they know they're operating in bad faith. They know that they know what they're up to in terms of the job, but they need to feed the kids, and that's for these 10 years, that's what I have to do. And in that job, what they then particularly do as a skill is go, literally, this job's worst job I've ever done, but it's a means to an end. I don't even think about it anymore. So as a coping mechanism, they actually don't stress about it. But that's a self-aware person who's like actually overall plotted and conditioning. I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of justifications for why people don't change their circumstances because of sort of higher values. I'm not so sure that's always true. I'm not sure that what would help more in some situations, if it's start the wheels in motion to start turning your life in a different direction, which plenty of people get to do. There are people who do have what we would think are mundane jobs, and for 40 years just love it. It's so simple. I go in, I sit at my desk, I eat biscuits or whatever, I talk, and they're just like, in their interpretation of it, they just love it. Now, the stereotypical view of that is, you live in a box, you drive in a box, you look in a box, you work in a box, you're a hamster at the mercy of, the mighty capitalist controller, and you don't even know that you're in a trap. You're miserable, and sort that out, you'll be better. But I think it's more complex than that. I think it's like some people are blissfully unaware, and it helps. They're blissfully unaware of the deep ways in which we might analyze things. And in some ways, that's a coping mechanism. Some people have awareness, and it's the awareness that does them in, but then it's the same awareness that frees them into other good things. Take me, for example, I know I'm really tetchy and prickly about autonomy and my time, right? And so it freaks me out to be, that's where I am at the moment, where I am. And actually, because of my circumstances, I can afford to be autonomous, and I've set it up. And you might say, set the wheels in motion. But then, I've had a lot of lucky things happen, and things go my way, and I have been in control, but it's also been lucky and out of control, and it could easily change. So for me, all you can do is manage your own predicament all the time. Take part in your own shtick. What's going on, and also without that, you can only do it at the level of awareness or intelligence or foresight or reflection or self-reliance, how self-reliant you feel. And I also think, John, that there are certain areas of your life where you feel like you can do that and control it really well. So you might be like brilliant in your career and your job and have it nailed, but you might have another area like a relationship with somebody, or your social skills, or you might have like someone who really struggles with modern technology and useless with it, and it just scares them like they're on the edge of a cliff. But when it comes to maybe bringing up kids, they're like solid. Whereas I could be like, whoa, flipping out, I've got a baby, what shit, what do I do? I don't know. But I'm brilliant in my in dealing with technology. So I think well-being and things like that is really multifaceted in like what area of your life it's around, what level of awareness you have, what opportunities do you actually have, in your real circumstances. And I also think what we're talking about today as well, John, is what's the current mode of society you're in the media and all the stuff going on around you, like the news, because that infiltrates us all the time. And I think that's what we're sort of saying. It's hard not to think about your well-being nowadays, because it's on every single show ever, isn't it? And every person, like John Lennon must have had a well-being problem, Elvis, Bobby Moore, but he never went on about it. They talked about Buddhism or leadership. They have different words. So why would you? Almost like fashionable, like it's on your mind. It's in the ether. It's in the social sort of thing. So it's natural that you would all catch it in a way.
It's a bit chicken and egg as well, though, isn't it? So, I'm not for a minute denying that people throughout the ages have had depression and all these kind of what I probably call. It's weird how well-being's almost like disconnected itself from mental health in a way, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
that's like a weird distinction these days, that it's like seen as separate, but it's like, well, how is it?
That's been talked about, has it? Like genuine, like what they might call mental health issue. Psychotherapeutic needs, and I'm depressed.
But that's what we're in now, which I don't think when John Lennon and we're saying as examples, we live in an age of anxiety, don't we? But basically, it's like the slightest thing. I've got anxiety. I'm depressed. It's easy to come to the tongue now. It's in the lexicon, isn't it? That we use those words, and well-being seems to have been co-opted into them.
I mean, would he have wrote the song Imagine if everything was brilliant? Kind of thing. I'm not, in society, like what Kierkegaard would have said, and Schopenhauer on another level. But being anxious and being sort of insecure and scared and down and then up, that's your default human state. Oh my God, my life, shit. What do I do with this? like all the time running like a little frequency in the back of your head. Whereas that because we've gone so clinical in a way, and so like I can't talk about the stuff we do on our podcast to most people. They just think you're absolutely bonkers. People are very much like at the surface of their lives, like living it, in it. It's no wonder that, with the obvious ups and downs, the human condition of being anxious a lot and angst, that when they feel that like hit them in the face, like a ball coming up, you've been pushing a ball underwater and then you let go and bang, it smacks you in the face. It's no wonder people feel stunned and a bit shocked, because it's like, what's that? Angst, nervousness, fear, loneliness, insignificance, no attention, addictions, needing this. If I don't get too many likes at this, then I must be irrelevant, or they didn't ring me back on time, and I went to a restaurant and they didn't have that food I wanted. It's a disaster. All these things, they smack you in the face if you don't understand that the default position of being alive isn't. It's not amazing, really, in many ways, but in many ways it can be.
That's where I think well-being is the issue, or it's an issue for me. So all those things, all those emotions and reactions and visceral experiences that people are having to modern life, I think they're perfectly natural, normal reactions to the world we're living in and the environment that we're living in.
Yeah.
And this is where well-being, it's like chicken and egg, isn't it? But I think well-being for me, it's treating the symptoms of an environment where people, one thing with the word well-being is it is binary, isn't it? So you mentioned that with the hard problems earlier. It's binary because it seems to be, well, either you're well or you're not. And if you're not well, you're unwell. Well, we clearly know there's more shades of grey in between there than that. But people are clearly seeing that people aren't doing that well. So now we've got this growing field of well-being. But that's just focusing on the symptoms. So whether it's depression, anxiety, all these feelings that people are having to the environment they're in, well-being and the well-being industry is just treating those symptoms. They're not doing anything to get at the core. Well, actually, yeah, why are we feeling like this? Why is anxiety? Why do I feel so anxious all the time? And that's when then you do dig into things like, I'm just using jobs as the example from previously. We are doing stuff that we really in quite contemporary times we've never done before, where we're living inside constantly. The bioenergetics episode we did, all that body comes first stuff.
Yeah.
Well, your body most of the time these days is not in an environment it's used to, and it should be in. So all these reactions are genuine human reactions to the environment that you're in. Now, the quote that you often see, which I quite like, is supposedly Yiddu Krishnamurti, but I've done some digging into it. It's not actually him; it was just attributed to him. But a lot of people will have heard that quote where he said, or he was said to have said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And that for me is a little bit of the well-being stuff. It's like, yeah, why would you want to feel well in the kind of environment that you're in and stuff? It's the environment that's the issue. It's not you. You're just reacting perfectly naturally to the circumstances you find yourself in. Whereas the well-being kind of gurus and people are jumping in on that and they're treating the person rather than the environment. You're always just going to be an organism in an environment that is acting on you. You can't separate the two. It's acting on you and you're acting on it. Well, if your environment is shit, you're going to feel shit.
No, I agree. I mean, it's like, yeah, when I'm ill and not feeling so good because of the environment or whatever, I've caught a disease or I've not been eating well, I don't know, it might not be my fault, it's just there. Now, if I go, then there's medicine available and I have some medicine, I feel better because the environment of my body, it's like, and actually having chemists where there's a society that has that, then, it makes me feel better. So that's like a simple example. Now, that's not meaning that you're right in a way, like when people aren't very well, like this is the state of being a human, it's not always your fault. It's the environment you're in. And that sometimes is the people who've built and designed the environment, but sometimes it's just the environment. It's like either I'm just in the world, that fundamentally a human worrying machine, is going to worry. A rock doesn't, and a tree doesn't, and a dog doesn't really know. Like you said in the other episode, the only time an animal knows it's going to die or anything bad, when it actually dies. So there's no, we're very... So just being a human, that there's an environment you're in that's just like, well, you've just got to deal with it. It's not easy being alive. And then there's the next thing of, well, I'm in a modern throne society of, 10-hour days work, get loads of money, have the car, all that type century of self stuff, get all your wants that you need, identify with all your products, identify with your status, all that ego stuff. So there's that where you're like, well, that might not necessarily make you well, but it could do. See, the thing is with the environments, usually, unless the environment's absolutely awful, there are people that thrive and there are people that survive in whatever, in the same environment. It's like down to them. Some people love a bit of chaos and they come to the forefront in those times. Some people just melt, which I see a lot in sports. But essentially, you acting on it. Is your well-being is something you're in control of to a point, but to another point, you're not, because there are forces acting on you that you always think that you're bypassing, but you're not necessarily.
Sport in terms of, let's say, I don't know, let's use football as an example. Football academies. There are well-being experts and roles and positions in football academies now. And obviously the key part of their role is the well-being of the kids and the athletes in those settings. And, we've seen it with all different sports like cycling, gymnastics is one recently, haven't we? So that's like, now we're all about the well-being of the athlete. But no matter which way you cut it, a lot of those environments, it's not a good environment for people to flourish a lot of the time. When you look at what you have to put your body through physically, clearly there's like huge psychological...
Well, it's a hierarchy environment for a start. You're all pretending you're friends.
Yeah, and then just throw like the media, all the kind of imagery around it, all just sport as an industry now.
Yeah.
The fact you're in a football academy, for one, you are essentially a commodity. When it comes down to it, you are a commodity for the business of the sport. Now, I know there's good people in there and that they're about the people, but still, that's the environment you're in. You are a commodity that can be bought and sold, let go, like kept, all that, upgraded, whatever. So it is the well-being stuff. It's just trying to help you deal with an environment you shouldn't really be in, Pat.
Well, this is again back to my study in sport, how one might live well through a sporting life. So inherently, first thing is in sport, winning and losing. Power. I'm the best. No, I'm not. Right. And the aim is to win. A professional sport I'm talking about, it's about generally that. That's the aim of competitive professional sport. Otherwise, just recreation, play, freestyle, be Mark Leclerc, go climbing, just set your own agenda, just go, surfing, skateboarding. And, there's more than one philosophy to why you do play sport. And you could even... I don't think you get very far trying to be professional competition if you didn't have at some point in your life the drive to want to defeat opponents. And there's a lot of people come out now and they're trying to flip that, these well-being sports people. They're like, no, play for purpose, play to offer entertainment, play for the artistry, play. And you're like, yeah, cool, I get that, but that might be a luxury afforded to the actual most talented who would win anyway, even on a bad day. Like you see that with Ronnie O'Sullivan in snooker, he's like, I don't care anymore. What makes me tick is just, I've battled and battled. I'm definitely the best of all time. So now I can chill and decide to play when I want to play with whatever level of philosophy I want to play the game for. And then they had the other player last week who was kicking off at that attitude, who does the commentary now, Sean Murphy. And he was saying, nah, terrible Ronnie's saying that. Snooker's so important to everybody and it is competitive and you should prepare. And now that's Sean's current version and he's into that. But Ronnie O'Sullivan can afford to take the more, I don't know, maybe the quarterback guy has got a bit of that who's just come back.
Oh, Tom Brady.
So he comes back. He might, he's playing, you can afford to play for a different philosophy. So I'm seeing a lot of these well-being people now going into academies and going into all these people saying, just play for the love. Just play. You're not an athlete. You're a person. Well, they're all true, but the bottom line is, if you're in a competitive sport, what I've found is winning and losing affects your sort of state of well-being as much as anything does. Too much winning can be a bit weird. Too much losing definitely can put you down. So where you can get this kind of balance, tends to be like keeps you generally okay. Some people can't deal with losing one thing. Tony McCoy, the race jockey, I think he can't think of losing one race, even though he's the best jockey of all time. So he was a bit weird with that. But that was him. So I think that, like, for me in sport, the environment of professional sport has to be taken into account first. And why would you even expect to feel well all the time or have well-being in that environment you've put yourself in. Andre Agassi's book, it was good because it was very raw, right? So he got a lot of plaudits because it were a bit like, oh my God, I can't believe someone said it. And he was like the first in his book, Open. But at the end of the day, he was moaning about being a swimmer and getting wet. He was complaining about his dad. He was complaining about all these things, all of that. But it was like the next chapter, he was like, oh, but it's amazing. Well, it was a good book because it revealed that he was never really well, but he never really moaned about not being well. It was like, you want to be a pro tennis player, think twice. This is what it's like. Well, it was for me. But he never he blamed a little bit, but he just kind of said, that's how it is. And I had some good people that stood by me through thick and thin. I was an idiot at times. Sometimes I felt powerful. Sometimes I felt insignificant. Sometimes I loved the game. Mostly I hated the game. Then I loved it again. And to me, that's like a bit more of a phenomenology. That's how it actually is. If you're deluded to think that any environment, any utopian type place is going to make you feel like well all the time without you taking part in it, there's an argument to say that why would you want to just be floating and happy constantly? You do learn. I know it's a cheesy thing, but you do learn, and it humbles you, and it does help your meaning sometimes when you brought down a peg or two. Hopefully not too far with tragedy and absurd illnesses and events and so on. But when you've been forced on the back foot and you've had tragedy and you've had upsetting and you've had to really go through some hard times in yourself, it's a strange thing because it's something you would never ask for. You'd never put it on people, and you actually have to go through it. But in some ways, there is a philosophy of don't deprive people of the struggle. And I think the well-being people are coming in a lot of the time, and they're almost like they mean well, but if they're not careful, they create issues that aren't there, and they deprive people of small opportunities to actually kind of toughen up and learn things because they've had to go through something. That's a bit like that good enough mother theory, isn't it, that we talked about on our course. Donald Winnicott, the British psychoanalyst from about 1962, I think so, saying that when you're bringing up children in the stages of their life, because maturing and understanding the world is stages of development and this constant unfolding of stages and like becoming, it's this process of well-being and being okay, you need room off your parents for the true self to emerge in all those bits. If you are a perfect mother or a perfect father, and you almost tell them how to behave in every situation, how to not get hurt, and how to do this and do that. Obviously, that's a natural instinct to try and do that. You don't want your kids being hurt. But if you can just be good enough and not perfect, you don't create a false self in that kid because you've planted your agenda on them. You give them room for an emergent, perhaps what you might call a true self to come up. Now, that true self might be better equipped to deal with all the jungle of life, all the bads, the goods bits, the gaps, the weirdness of life, rather than maybe someone who's been brought up as every time there's a bit of an issue, no, be great, be gratitude, cheer up, life's too short, go do some yoga, we'll get you a psychotherapist, we'll get you to a nutritionist, so the art is knowing that line, isn't it? If a kid's really upset and ill, deal with it before it goes off on one. But if it's just an issue at school, like, they've been getting picked on a little bit, don't go flying into the headmaster and, or mistress and say, I want to get this kid. So we're not offering any solutions to sort of well-being here. But what I am suggesting is be very careful when you start calling yourself a well-being expert, or even the topic in the first place is a topic. It might not even be a thing in the first place.
I don't know if you use LinkedIn or not. I have a thing on there. I don't really use it. I find it like painful when I go on there and you just see, and it's this kind of stuff. So, you mentioned Agassi in his book, and it was a brilliant book, wasn't it? Because he kind of talked openly about, he talks about, how brutal his dad was with him and all that stuff, and how he used to make him practice and all that. And it was like an eye opener, wasn't it? It's like, bloody hell, he's been honest, and he's like, yeah. I think people really identified with that and thought, brilliant, he's been authentic.
He'd taken drugs when he was down. He got let.
Yeah, all that kind of openness of just putting it out there and going, I'm not going to try and impression manage this book out. I'm just going to tell you what's and all. This is what it was like. And people, that resonates. But now it's gone the opposite where everyone just overshares. So if you look on like LinkedIn, it's like the trend is putting out there how, you know, you've been struggling with your well-being and blah, blah. And it's like, oh, this and like, it's good to talk and all that, which it is. I genuinely think I'm seeing people now impression managing, pretending that they're being open. So they're just inventing issues and like they're making mountains out of molehills to get the likes and the clicks. And no one really calls it out because it's like it's an untouchable subject, isn't it? You can't go near mental health and, you know, like you can't be like criticizing people. So no one really calls it out. So you've got this world of like inauthentic false selfness.
Yeah.
And it's fueled a little bit by well-being because that's the trend. It's like the bandwagon you can get on both as like, you can make money out of it as a practitioner, but also like you can make social capital out of it if you admit to struggling with your well-being and all that stuff.
Well, you cover that a lot on the course, don't you? The signalling as well. You're signalling in a way now that, well, if that's what people have, I've got it, which means I'm real. You know, if it's trendy to say your vulnerabilities rather than just talking to your friends privately and keeping everything, you know what I mean, and genuinely working through those things. I mean, you could say some people, it does make, in the modern world, you could say, is the signalling and getting attention that fixes them. Whether that's sustainable or not, fine, but that might be them managing their world. If you're Kim Kardashian, you're always going to get sympathy, so why not use it, I suppose? If you can get on TV whenever you want and it makes you feel better because you're famous, TV, or release a new song. If you're a great artist, like just bang out another album and do another tour. You know, like it doesn't really. It's the individual person making you tick. But I think that signalling thing, like we were saying the other day, but controversial again, and it's not said, but it's like that Movember thing, isn't it? People going around going, I'm growing a moustache for cancer awareness. It's like, yeah, but just put a tenner a month into cancer research. Don't grow a moustache. You basically always wanted to grow a moustache, most of you. You're using it as an excuse and you're signalling when people say oh, I'm like, people don't nowadays know what cancer is. Now, if they went then and raised 20 grand for it, you're like, flipping, go for it, you know, like. But what I see a lot of people is they do it on a surface, like indicator level, just to make themselves feel like they're fitting in or that they're doing good.
That's the Society of the Spectacle, isn't it? That Guy Debord stuff that Stephen West did a good podcast on. I'd recommend that to people. It's worth listening. But he's using that philosopher to say it's like, it's about the spectacle now. It's not about what you actually do. It's about what spectacle that then creates. So yeah, it's not about giving to charity. It's about giving to charity and then looking like you give to charity.
Right.
And I think the well-being, I mean, there was a guy I saw recently, I think it went, because people just started ripping him because it was so blatantly like, you know, just signaling stuff. I think he was an employer and he was literally filming himself crying to camera that he'd posted on LinkedIn, you know, that he was so devastated. I don't know if he'd had to let some employees go or something and he'd just done it wrong.
Was it a Starbucks thing?
I don't know if it was Starbucks, but he was like literally crying on camera. And it's like, whoever would start crying and then get the phone and go, I'll tell you what, I'll film this and I'm going to stick this on LinkedIn. And he obviously was thinking, I mean, it could have been parody. If it was parody, it was genius, but I think it was real. And he was trying to make out that, you know, he's got flaws and he got it wrong and it was his mistake and he's gutted and he's trying to show that, you know, and it's like, it's just this like, what game are people playing here with all these different little things around? And I do think, you know, at the core of it, it is a bit of a crisis of meaning, which is a lot of the thread that runs through a lot of our stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are they've never looked at it close, so they're constantly just looking for something to grab to as the next thing to kind of explain why they're just not feeling quite right, when really it's down to like, you know, how meaningful is what you're doing? You know, how authentic do you feel you're being in you, living your life as you want to live it? Even if you got the car, the house, the job, the clothes, the jewelry, the watches, it doesn't matter what level of society you're at, does it? Whether you're a billionaire or you're like on the street, people have still got these same inherent human instinctual feelings around what am I doing with my life? What's going on?
Yeah.
And well-being is kind of a little bit of a sticking plaster to put on some of that stuff, rather than just going, right, let's frigging get into some of this then. Yeah, what is the meaning of that? What is it about? Which is what we try and do with the philosophers and stuff. That for me is what well-being would be more about, which is more aligned with being well. All right, you're a human being here, you were thrown onto this world. What we're going to do now? That's being well, isn't it? a human being, Dasein, as Heidegger called it, what's that like for you as a being in the world? Well-being is the other end of that. It's sticking plaster, going, oh yeah, you've got all these natural human
Yes.
thoughts and feelings and you're struggling a bit.
Yeah.
Let's throw some well-being at you.
Yeah. So it's shallow, quick fix type.
Looks good because the employer can go, yeah, we've got this and we do that. And if you come and work for us, you get, oh, this is part of your package and blah, blah, blah. And it looks brilliant. And
What's interesting in that book I mentioned earlier is called Wicked and Wise. And I suppose we've talked a lot about the difference between wisdom and knowledge. And perhaps this isn't being highbrow or snobbish, but perhaps if you've just jumped onto well-being, you might use the word, but if you've just jumped onto it and it's a business opportunity and you've done a bit of, an NLP course, which can be useful, or you've done a little therapy course and you get a job in it because you've got good organizational skills. Also, you've read a book, on how to build a business, all the books, and you've signed up to coaching courses where this is how you build a business, and you spot a bit of tragedy or a gap in the market. Then I suppose you go in there and you're a bit of a shallow. You're shallow. You haven't been done 20, 30 years in psychotherapy. Jordan Peterson is criticised a lot for his quick snips and, like clean your room, look under your bed, make sure, and if you want to feel better, sort that pile of papers out, that you've been avoiding, because it's a metaphor for cleaning up your life. Very, very practically oriented things that people have liked. Some people have killed him for it. But what you can't deny about the man is if you go and watch his lectures and you hear about his psychotherapeutics, he's a psychotherapist and his practice and his reading that he's read, you cannot deny that man is wise and knowledgeable, not as knowledgeable and has become wise, been able to chuck out bits of wisdom and has helped people, and probably not help people because he got so big, playing the odds, you're always going to unhelp some people because they're going to get fanatic or they're going to take what you said the wrong way. But generally, the guy's deep. He's a deep guy, and if I could have a chat with him for an hour, I'm sure I would come away enlightened. Whereas some of the people I know now that are doing well-being jobs, or sports psychologists that have opened up well-being branches for coaching well-being now, and athlete well-being, and parent well-being, and all of this, it's just literally popped up because it's like, oh, you like McDonald's change which burger they're selling this month. So this is like who really understands it and accepts it's a complex, wicked problem that's like the philosophers did about existence and life, and Camus, the absurdity of life and Sisyphus, and what a struggle it is to push your boulder up and down every day, and you've got to find your own way through it and try and be happy. It's not about being depressed and going, oh God, all that philosophy and existential people are depressive. It's just about actually accepting that as a real part of life, so that then you can go, okay, so what we're going to do then? So, well, when it's good, let's have it good, and when it's inevitably not so good, ride it out as best as I can. Whereas it's not a fix. There's no solutions. I mean, I do some of my talks with people now, and you have to change depending on the audience and the culture. When I talk to people now, in the first 5 minutes, I get it right out there. I have no solutions. I have no solutions apart from getting them to think. So they're the wrong person if they think that it's going to be like coming to a chemist or something. As I'll just need you to think, and that could be the last thing you want to do. So if you don't want to talk, ring me back in a month. If you do want to think a bit and try, then we can maybe we'll get on. What I've had reported around that is that over a 6 month to a year period, people feel better more days than they feel bad. But I haven't gone on there originally to make them better. I've gone on there to talk to them as people and open up possibilities about how they might think about what they're going through. And it's often, John, it's better that I don't know their actual issues in a way, so they can go back in on them. Sometimes they tell me, but I sometimes don't know. And I think one thing I learned when I actually did study NLP in a way years ago, remember this thing that try never to turn a process into a thing. And it's called a nominalization. You denominalize something. I think that was the word. So when you say someone's got a cold, they haven't got a cold. In a weird way, they're colding. They're going through an experience of something coming into the body and they're having symptoms and and they're managing it, and it's there. When you go, you've got a cold, it's like a bit more like, fix it, give me some Benylin. I've got this thing, get rid of it. And that can be useful in certain circumstances because it's solution. You might say that to a kid. Oh, you've hurt your knee. Put a plaster on it. Done. Go out again. boom, boom. So it's useful that, but when it comes to more serious things like well-being or wellness or living or being a being is a process. It's an ongoing, evolving, strange, weird, unfolding process, your life. As soon as you go, oh, I know it's well-being, you've got a well-being problem, it's like you're turning it into like a fixed thing that can just be solved. And it's like, no, there's no solution. It's a process. It'll never stop. It's the same as being an athlete. There's no over the rainbow ever.
And that was something a quote I liked to yours. I was rereading some of your thesis this morning. One of the quotes there, you've got time is being. I had never considered this until considering Heidegger's assertion that Dasein is forever building its past by what it aims at in its future. And it is that, isn't it? I think a lot of the well-being is it's here and now, right? We need to make you well here in this kind of role or in this context or in this circumstance, and there isn't any past or future. It's just like, oh, you got a cold, basically, like you've just said there, you're not well.
Yeah.
Because the opposite of well-being has to be like, you're unwell, you've got an issue, let's fix it. Well, here's this, and this, and you can do this, and that. And there isn't any of that being through time, which surely is a core part of being well. The fact that you have to live through time.
I was watching The Crown last night, and there was a bit on the new series, and it was saying that about grief. And the Duke says to this lady who lost a 5-year-old, he said, "Oh, I lost a sister, and grief to me was like it lives with you forever in your cells, it's with you all the time. All you do is learn to live with it and try and find new things." So he did horse things, cart thing or whatever. He got into where the horse pulls them along, 6 horses, and he said to this lady, "Oh, you should try it, it's fun." And what he did, he didn't try and solve her problem and say, "Oh, I know what you're going through." He just said, "This is what I went through, and how it's still an ongoing process 50 years later for me."
Have you watched Stutch yet?
No, I haven't, no.
But there's a brilliant, exactly like that. There's a brilliant bit. So it's Jonah Hill, and I guess he'd call himself a psychotherapist. And you find out as it goes along, I won't spoil it for you too much, but they both lost a brother basically when they were younger. And Jonah's asked, because he's a lot older, he's in his 70s, I think, by this point, and he's asking him, "Oh, get easier." And he just like brutally just goes like, "No." He's like, "You'll have that for the rest of your life." Just brutal, and you could see Jonah Hill's like, but he's just like, there's these tools that I can get you to live with it more as you get older, and it'll but it's always going to be there. You're never going to lose that. Whereas I think maybe from a well-being point of view, the temptation is to kind of dampen stuff down, isn't it? And oh yeah, don't be feeling that. We don't want you feeling anxious, so we're going to do this. And don't you be feeling...
Yes.
Where it's like, no, that's what you're going to feel. And he was like, just brutal with him. He was like, yeah, you'll feel that forever. As long as you're alive, you'll feel that. But that's what living is through time, isn't it?
Well, like the gambling addicts and the alcoholic, they did this on 16.3 2 days sober. It's like, I haven't got rid of it. It's with me. I have to deal with it every day. It's not automatic. I don't get fixed. I've got to keep fixing myself every day and taking part in not drinking or not gambling. And I think when you tie in a little bit of neuroscience, if you take a bit of a science way of it, and you go on a bit like, all the brain really is, and evolutionarily we just make predictions. The Heidegger quote about we are always building our futures. We are always building our pasts, and our experience, our meaning of our lives by what we do in our future. When your future is a little bit exciting, or you look forward to tiny little things, I've got a chocolate bar, we've got a Christmas cake, we're going to crack it open early, we'll have a cup of tea later, and there's another Netflix drama. Your whole day goes, whoa, right, yeah. It's nothing. It's like Christmas is coming, or a bit of cake, and we'll have the fire, or we're going to have the first fire. And these are the little things in every day that make you make your brain anticipate the future in a it's going to be okay. Now, when you're ill and your back's broke and you can't see how the future's going to be even better in an hour, or never mind, it gets really hard to not feel well. And there isn't a lot that's going to actually fix that. If you go and see a chiropractor and he clacks your back and suddenly you can dance and your back problem's gone, suddenly you're like, Ray, and the whole of your future outlook changes. So your brain's making all these new predictions based on that tiny bit of progress you make. So every little bit of good news, every little time you notice a new sunset, or a bit of a autumn coming, or every time you have a bad round of golf and hit 2 good shots on the trot, you go, oh, well, maybe. And I think that's the ongoing chaos and the ongoing strangeness of what it is to the brain. All the brain wants to do is pretty good stuff. So if you just watch a bit too much news, you get a little bit ill, you're think the world's going to end, and no one's rung you up, and there's nothing to look forward to, everything starts to go grey and black. And your past even starts to be re-edited as a bit of a fake or a bit gloomy, and what have I ever done, and I never fulfilled my potential, But as soon as you start doing well, and my business is growing, me and my wife are getting on well, my daughter's rung me up a few times, I've got to beat that. As soon as you feel progress or food, new films, something to look forward to, that's what Heidegger meant. Your past suddenly doesn't feel as heavy and bad. You remember the good things. So you authentically relate with your past, as what Heidegger said as retrieval. You start retrieving from your past elements that you were really good about, because you're relating to your future more authentically, which is anticipation rather than waiting for your future. So Heidegger's version of being authentically and feeling a bit better about your past and your future is that, you retrieve from your past and you anticipate the future, and that time, no matter what you go through, it's a bit better. But he didn't say you can be in that state all the time. Sometimes you just feel like you're in purgatory, and you feel like your past is heavy and it's a burden, and it weighs on you. So Heidegger just said that you're being in the world, and that you look at your past in an authentic way and say, right, all the good things, and you retrieve it and it's not as heavy, or the future, you anticipate it. And then the present becomes a lot more buoyant rather than feeling stuck. So again, he said you can't be in that state all the time, but you can keep trying to take part in it through things like, self-awareness, and trying to create conditions that for you in your everyday life, what he called everydayness, that make you tick, basically. So you have this responsibility to kind of look after yourself in some ways, but also that don't be too hard on yourself about that, because we are thrown into the world and we're given certain things and certain situations we can do nothing about.
Last point for me on that ties into what you're saying about Heidegger through time. I think a big thing that I see through this whole well-being movement is this obsession with tracking and monitoring and optimizing. So whether it's your calories, your number of steps, how well you've slept that night, all these really objective measurements, which I think even a lot of companies are starting using with their staff, where, they're really monitoring their heart rate and even stuff like that, under the illusion or the guise of we care about their well-being, we're monitoring them. But I don't think that helps you be well, because like you were mentioning a little bit earlier about, those feelings, you feel like a little bit of excitement, or you've got something to look forward to and all that. If you've now outsourced that to your app, and you're thinking, do I feel well today? Do I feel tired? I'm not sure, but because my app's telling me that I had this and I did that, and my heart rate's doing this, but I actually feel all right today. I feel quite good. I feel quite energetic. People are losing touch with actually how it feels to feel well, even though they're massively more conscious about well-being. And I think a big part of it is this digitalization and this optimization culture of you almost become a product yourself, like a project that you're working on to improve, like you're a machine basically. But you're not. You're a Dasein and you're a being in the world.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. That book you told me to read, When the Machine Stops, by E.M. Forster, written in 1909, just got to that, didn't it? That was brilliant. Just about how if you become too rational, too machine, too scientific, overly, like most things, or you could go too the other way, non-science and blah, 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 to your detriment. But yeah, if you start looking, you've lost touch with yourself and your own feelings and how you feel. It's very difficult when you're outsourcing that wisdom to a computer number. Oh my God, I'm feeling good. I've done 12,000 steps. Yeah, but how did you do the steps? I can like when I do my little court sprint exercises, it takes me I do 6 sets of a minute on with 30 seconds off, say. The number I get varies, but that sorts me out. It's only 6 minutes work, but it's my little thing, and I do them in a certain rhythm, and it's the rhythm of how I do them that helps me, because I can do them. Now, if you chuck me on a bike for 20, I might hate it and feel like, that was fun. Your computer can't know everything about your phenomenology. It doesn't know about your lived experience and the feelings and the relationship you have with that moment. And that's what I was saying at the end of the study as well, that this wonderment, I get professional sports people and they just cannot see the beauty anymore in what they do. They've lost that. Oh, a new pair of football boots, new kit, or the smell of the turf, or an opposition to play and try and win. Oh, could win, could lose. that joy, that they see a squash court still, it's like, oh, squash court, yeah, big deal. So what? There's a crowd watching. It's not a topic you can nail down, pin down. I don't think we're going around going, this is how to be well or not to be well. When I did my study, it was to go how one might live well, not how you should live well or how to. And I think the moment that with a wicked problem like this or a concept, of a made up thing, I think you've got to be very careful you don't turn it into an input output model, dead simple, that can be sold. And I think you've always got to remember that it's something that's highly, highly personal, and the individual has to play a role in helping themselves with it. But there are things that go on sometimes that just are too much, and you just can't feel well. And it's bloody hard. It's just, you just can't, there's nothing you can do. You can take all the advice, you just can't get out of it. And then out of nowhere, perhaps like life, sometimes it just gets a bit better, and then it might go bang, really better. And you can't believe that you were in that place. That's how I see it. It's how it might go, rather than how to.
Right, go and watch That'll give you a buzz. I bet you're buzzing off it.
Right, I will.